again, Athish Gaming here with my latest TBC class picking guide, this time covering the Priest. As before, we will be going over boss DPS single target healing, overall raid DPS raid healing, class and spec utility, PvP strength, overall desirability in raids, and my general thoughts. So, Disc Priest. Disc Priest has good single target healing, moderate raid healing. They offer unique spec utility, but it may actually not be required in raids, and they are very, very strong in PvP. Often considered the most offensive healer. I think in actuality they're the most flexible healer between offense and defense. Between Mass Dispel, Power Word Shield, they have a lot of saving power, they have a lot of debuffing power, they can do some damage. And they're pretty resilient in their own right. So overall, a great choice for a PvP healer. They have moderate desirability, but I'm going to cover some caveats to that. So overall, Disc Priest, one of the best PvP healers with great defensive and also offensive ability. In a raid, however, this is a spec that you may be less likely to take. Their big thing is improved Divine Spirit, which is classes get 10% of their spirit as spell damage and healing, and this is very dependent on the class. Some classes like Warlocks have essentially no spirit, whereas other classes like Priests, Druids will have substantially more spirit. This is one of the few raid buffs that you may in fact have your PvP friend that doesn't care about raid lockouts join your raid, get summoned to the boss, buff everyone with spirit, log off, and have the other person log in. That might be the case for this specific spec. They do have some good tools, power infusion and pain suppression, but in general, and we're going to cover this, the Holy spec offers a bit more. So moving on to Holy Priest. Their single target healing is very good. Their raid healing is also very good. They don't have any unique buffs, but being Deep Holy gives you access to one of the best AoE healing spells, and their PvP strength is generally low. Disc Priest is really the PvP spec. Holy Priest is lacking some of the tools that really make a Disc Priest shine. As far as their desirability in raids, they're very desirable. These are going to be one of the classes that you're chasing in TBC to have enough of, and especially enough good ones. Why? Because they are probably the most flexible healer. They can be great single target tank healers, especially if you're in a multi-tank fight and you need people to heal multiple tanks. They can do great raid healing with Circle of Healing. They can do preventative healing with Renew. They can save people with Power Word Shield on a much lower cooldown than, say, NS. Generally, you'll have 1 to 2 Holy Priests in your raid. Generally speaking, a Shaman will give a little bit more raid damage by Bloodlust, but the Holy Priest will bring more healing power. And they also have some neat utility in Mass Dispel, and of course, you want at least one to bring Power Word Fortitude, which is, a huge bonus to your raid in terms of surviving mechanics. And lastly, we have the Shadow Priest. Shadow Priest is a bit of an odd one. Their boss DPS is low. Their AoE and raid damage is very low. But they have exceedingly high class and spec utility for both offense and defense, in this case healing. And they uniquely scale. Their damage makes their utility higher, so giving them gear and getting them geared makes them a more supportive class, unlike a lot of things where it's just kind of flat. Their PvP strength is decidedly moderate. They require some specific comps to be good, but in those comps are quite good. A raid will generally need to have at least one Shadow Priest. It's unlikely to have 2, but it wouldn't be the end of the world to have 2. They are overall vastly improved with TBC, and they're unique for this expansion. Mana Battery utility is really good, in addition to buffing the casting of more than just your Warlocks. And spoilers, Warlocks are really good, so Shadow Priest's stock goes up. But they also have some secondary things, like you still have Power Word Shield, and Power Word Shield at the right time on the right person can save an attempt. really good. Um, Silence, a little bit less utility. Sometimes you don't even take it, but it's a fairly good ability. Um, the biggest thing, however, that makes them more viable is the fact that the debuff limit goes up, and Shadow Priests apply a lot of debuffs. Shadow Weaving's a debuff, Vampiric Embrace, Vampiric Touch, Misery, Shadow Word Pain, Mind Flay are all debuffs. That's like 6 debuffs for one person. Um, it's way too many for Classic, but in TBC, with only 25 people and a 40 limit, you can have a Shadow Priest in. So their big new thing is Vampiric Touch, which is causes 650 shadow damage over 15 seconds and causes all party members to gain mana equal to 5% of any shadow spell damage you deal. This is fantastic. It won't necessarily pay for your shadow spells. It's just a discount on your shadow spells. But the more gear you have, the more damage you deal, the more mana you give your generally a healer group, the harder your healers and usually a mage as well can pump without going the safer your runs are. So they're a very desirable class. They will not, however, be topping meters. They're not a meter topper kind of class. There's just some just issues with the class baseline that prevent them from competing with the really super scalers. So overall, priests are one of, if not the best healing classes with a high utility but fairly low damage spec. In PvP, priests are incredible. Discipline priests have immense flexibility between offensive and defensive tools. PvE holy priests are the most flexible healers and can sometimes even exceed other healers in single target and raid healing with the same spec. Shadow priests are amongst the lower damage dealers. They have a lot of issues that prevent them from beating out in raw numbers, but everyone will want a Shadow Priest in their raid, and any mana user will generally want to be in the Shadow Priest group, which means they're worth bringing. Um, as far as raid spots, it should be fairly easy. Holy priests, especially really good holy priests, are going to be in high demand, and shadow priests may be slightly less so, just because it's a fairly popular spec. It's this priest that's, you get the cool shadow form and that kind of stuff. So that might have a little bit more competition for it, but generally speaking, the real meter chasers, parse kings, will be avoiding it, which means that it will be slightly less competitive than the other ones. Overall, I think you can't go wrong picking priest, no matter what your focus is. As far as just to cover it briefly, as far as dungeons, Shadow isn't generally considered the best in dungeons, but Holy is a great healer and can heal their dungeons perfectly fine. Not that Shadow is potentially bad, it's just that Shadow's real weakness is their lack of AoE compared to other casters, and if you are doing AoE pulls in dungeons, you can kind of feel it. There is the bonus, though, that they will be helping the healer keep the run chugging along, which, especially early on, can be good. If you have anything else, if there's anything you think I got wrong or I was mistaken about, or comments you'd like to make, improvements I can make to the video, I'd love to hear it. Just leave a comment below and I will respond to it. Otherwise, thanks for watching.